next 6 months.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. And I'd like to make a few comments on Senator Stevens' presentation, and to the Senate referring to Ireland. I mean, the last thing I'd ever do would be attack Senator Stevens because of my respect for the lady. Being a lady from out of Cessnock, it's a pity she never joined the National Party when she became political. But seriously, no, I do respect Senator Stevens, and I'm not going to go on any sort of personal attack of what she said, except to bring it to. She mentioned about Ireland, and I was with Senator Stevens a few months ago when we met with some of the Irish politicians. Now, Ireland has 4.5 million population, and they owe $120 billion. They took out the debts of their bank. But I want to take you to Queensland. Queensland also has 4.5 million people, and they have a debt of $72 billion and going up, heading towards Ireland. Now, how did they get that debt? They got their debt from years of Labor government. Now, people are being critical of the Campbell-Newman Liberal National Party government in Queensland for tightening the belt, reining in the spending. Well, their other option is go down the road of Ireland. As I said, same populations. Queensland, 4.5 million people. Ireland, 4.5 million people. Ireland owes $120 billion of debt. Queensland on $72 billion, forecast under the previous government to go to $85 billion by 2015 and some $100 billion by around 2020, getting to the same parallel financial mess as Ireland. Luckily, there's a new government there that realises that managing money is important, but that's a tough job they're facing. Just like in New South Wales, when our Farrell-Stone coalition government was elected on the 26th of March 2011, guess what in the year's budget? A $5 billion black hole. Well, what's new? So, Mr Acting Deputy President, let's look at this motion of Senator Fifield's. The Gillard government's fiscal strategy. A very important motion here of general business today. Now, just yesterday, Senator Cormann and I moved a motion here in the Senate calling on the final budget outcome to be released before Election Day, September the 14th. Of course, the ALP government and the Greens voted it down. Why did they vote it down? Why do they not want to let the Australian people know how much money they will borrow this financial year, which of course, Mr Acting Deputy President, concludes on the 30th of June, like any other financial year? Over the last 5 years, the final budget outcome has been released between the 24th and the 30th of September. So, this year will be no different. The budget outcome of this financial year will be released after the election. I wonder why, colleagues, they chose the date of September the 14th. So the election can be held before the final budget outcome, the facts, the truths of this year's budget where we're going to have a budget surplus. On more than 400 occasions, the Prime Minister, Ms Gillard, and the Treasurer, Mr Swan, have said there will be a budget surplus. Oh, hang on, Christmas break comes along. Sorry, the budget surplus has been dumped. There will be no budget surplus. There will be another debt. Now, I wonder how much debt. Well, we'll get a bit of an indication, Mr Acting Deputy President, in the May budget this year when Treasurer Swan delivers that budget. He might say this year it's not going to be a $1.5 billion surplus like he said in the MyEFO back in November. It'll be about a $4 billion deficit. That's what he'll say. And he'll make his forecast for the next financial year. That'll be another figure probably in the red. He'll say it might tone it down a bit, $1 or $2 billion in the red, borrowing more money. But you wait till we get that final budget, the budget outcome towards the end of September. It will be greater than the $4 billion, whatever Mr Swan says. There is nothing surer than that, because the government will go on a borrowing spending spree. We will only be able to monitor the Australian Office of Financial Management's website to see where the gross debt is going. The government will borrow money to buy votes. That's exactly what they will do. And as sure as I stand here, Mr Acting Deputy President, the figure forecast for this year's budget deficit in May will be higher come September when we get the real figures. They will borrow money to buy votes. And that is all the Labor Party know is debt, debt and more debt. Remember when Miss Gillard was made Prime Minister? The new transparent government she will lead. Where's the transparency when you're hiding the budget figures? Why did you not support Senator Cormann and my motion yesterday? What have you got to hide? Well, we know the Greens will back you up, hiding the budget figures, because the Greens never ever look at budgets. I mean, they're a closed shop. Their conferences, they will not let the media in. So when it comes to managing money, the Greens are probably worse than the Australian Labor Party. Spend, spend, borrow, borrow, penalise success and reward failure. That is the attitude of the socialists in this place. And that's what will happen, and that's what we'll see more of. Penalise success, penalise effort, penalise hard work and reward failure. That's what socialism is about. This nation was built on what? Hard work, hard sweat and effort. Go back to our first export of our nation, wool. Go back to the wool. The days when we first got our first exports going and started to build our nation.
On both sides of the chamber will respect the right of the senator on his feet who has the call to be heard in silence. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I couldn't agree with you more. Let's go back to the early days of European settlement, when the workers went out into the scrub, cleared the country, cut the trees down, split them with wedges, dug the holes with crowbars and shovels and built the fences up over some pretty rough country. And along came the sheep. And the shearers bent their back. Those very same shearers who started the Australian Labor Party under the Tree of Knowledge at Barcaldine in Western Queensland. The workers. We don't have any here today. We don't even have a shearer amongst the Labor politicians. I think they must be quite ashamed about that the shearers are on our side of the parliament. Yeah, amazing, isn't it? That's where they've come from. That's where they've gone to. The hard work. So let's penalise hard work, and we'll see more of it in the superannuation. I mean, superannuation was one of the good schemes the Hawke-Keating government brought in, so people would save for their retirement and not have to rely on the taxpayers to pay their retirement. But now, if you're going to get to $1 million, we'll cop into that because the $1.34 trillion, an enormous amount of superannuation savings, is that nest egg that the Labor government is saying we can get some of this to help us fill our black hole of budgets. $262 billion of gross debt as of last Friday, Mr Acting Deputy President. Those listening on the radio, just go to the website, Australian Office of Financial Management, AOFM. Bring up the website, aofm.gov.au, and every Friday afternoon, right in the middle of the home page, you'll see the gross debt of this government. Now, I'll be honest, it started off around $50 billion. I discussed this with former Senator Nick Minchin. I said, did we really have a $50 billion debt on that figure when Labor was elected in 2007? He said, yes, there was. He said, we kept it there to keep the government bond market open. Then we put $50 billion in the bank to neutralise it, so it was zero. So it started off at $50 billion in 2007, and last Friday it was $262 billion. That's an increase of $212 billion in just these 5 years of this government. $212 billion. Of course, some of that through residential mortgage-backed securities, buying loans off small institutions to give them liquidity to lend money during the global financial crisis. A fair bit of it on the National Broadband Network, which is not even in the budget. It's just draw off the government's AOFM, draw the money, and we'll pay it back later when the scheme gets profitable. You don't hold your breath for that. So here we have this debt. It's going to cost about $12 billion a year interest alone, because, Mr Acting Deputy President, we must refer to the gross debt, the $262 billion, because what we've got on the good side in the bank we can't touch. There's $82 billion of future fund we need for public servants' retirements. There's $22 billion of HECS fees. We can't charge the students interest on their debt. Once they get a job and start earning $30,000 a year or more, they start paying it back. And then we've got about $16.5 billion of residential mortgage-backed securities, those loan packages the government have bought. We make a whisker of profit on them. So what we've got in the bank, let me explain to you, Mr Acting Deputy President, another way. If you owed the bank $1 million and you've been charged, say, 7% interest, you had to find $70,000 a year, but you had in the bank $500,000, you'd have a gross debt of $1 million, but a net debt of $500,000. But the $500,000 you had in the bank would be earning interest at, say, 4.5%. You could use that money to help pay your debt. But the government's good side of the ledger, you can't use any of it to help pay the debt, so we have to pay the interest on the gross amount of debt. Forget the net amount. The net amount does not earn us any money. We just have to pay off the gross debt this government has built. And the most amazing thing of all was in November 2011, the Reserve Bank lowered interest rates from 4.75% down to 4.5%. They said the economy's slowing, it's not going good. In fact, a few months before that I was talking to Mr Martin Parkinson in the Sydney airport, and I said to him the next interest rate movement will be down, and he laughed at me. I suppose he's a bit embarrassed when a broken down old cocky has it right and the boss of Treasury has it wrong. But the fact is I live in the real world. I see what small business is happening, I see what retail sales are doing, and they're terrible. And so I picked it right. As I said, he might be embarrassed that a broken down shearer picked the economy right and the boss of Treasury didn't. But for once in my life I was right. I've been wrong many, many times. So what was the government doing then? Here's the Reserve Bank stimulating the economy. Why? Well, prior to that, the Reserve Bank put up interest rates. They were raising them while the government was borrowing money and stimulating the economy. Now, isn't it amazing? What economists would say, this is the right thing to do. The Reserve Bank is raising interest rates, so we're going to keep borrowing and spending money to stimulate the economy. It's like driving your car with your foot on the accelerator and pulling on the handbrake at the same time. The Reserve Bank was pulling on the handbrake while this government was borrowing money and spending it. That is crazy. Now we have this debt. That is what we're left with, this huge debt. And where do they spend it? If you run a business, Mr Acting Deputy President, and you borrow money to improve your business, to grow your business, better machinery to make you more productive. No, they didn't build any train lines to make our freight system better and more efficient. No Melbourne to Brisbane train line built. No, they gave $900 for people to spend on what they wanted to spend on. Buy a TV, go to the club and put in a poker machine. No infrastructure being built except for what the states are responsible for. The building education revolution. At my hometown, one of the schools there at Inverell, they had 4 perfectly good classrooms. So what did the government do? They pulled down those 4 perfectly good classrooms and replaced them with 4 new classrooms. And that is supposed to be spending money wisely. Now that's stupidity. I remember the Nationals launch last election, 2010, were down at Wagga Wagga. I wasn't there, but the team were down at Wagga Wagga. And that day, the coal of the covered outdoor learning area, it wasn't a windy day. They built this big one in Wagga, and it fell over. Just collapsed. They said, stand back, it's going down. What a good investment that was. Yeah, build a new covered outdoor learning area and it just collapses on the day of the Nationals election campaign launch. We could go to the pink bats. Sadly, 4 lives were lost. Houses were burnt down. If people want to have insulation in their roof of their homes, put it in themselves. They'll save on electricity. There's a saving there. They'll insulate the house better. It's not for governments to do that. If you're going to borrow money, build some infrastructure to make your business more efficient. But no, we never went near that. Of course, the decision of August 2008 to roll out the red carpet for asylum seekers. And here we are now, $6.6 billion out of pocket at the cost of asylum seekers. We're a generous country, and I, in my hometown, country town, a proud town I live in at Inverell, 12,000 people, we have Sudanese asylum seekers, they're refugees. A lovely lady at home went and basically freed them. One lady came here with 4 children. Her husband had been murdered, her brother had been murdered, and she got a new opportunity in life in a beautiful country town like where I live at Inverell. These are the genuine refugees we need to help, whose lives are at threat. But we've got people here paying in an industry to get on a dangerous leaky boat and lose their life. That's the industry we've got, and what is also costing the taxpayers an enormous amount of money. This is at times, Mr Acting Deputy President, when the new taxes come in. There won't be any new taxes in the 2007 campaign. Alco-Pops tax, luxury car tax. You know, tax that car if someone's been successful and worked hard and can afford a more expensive car. That is wrong. Tax that. You know, as I said, penalise success, reward failure. That's what socialist governments are about. Then came the cigarette tax, then the flood tax. Along comes the carbon tax, the mining tax. I mean, I could talk on the minerals resource rent tax. How embarrassing it must be where those three big mining companies just sucked the Prime Minister in. I've seen the signed paper where all royalties must be credited. If you want to get a better share of the royalties, simply let the states raise their royalties. Those resources in the ground belong to the Crown. The Crown is the state. So all you have to say to the states, raise your royalties. Then Canberra pays less to the states. Money saved is money made. That's how you run business. Instead of this whole mess of the mineral resource rent tax, budgeted to spend so much and didn't raise a red cent. I mean, it's quite amazing. Of course, then the liquid petroleum gas tax was never introduced by the coalition. And they brought it in because as a clean fuel, run your car on gas, and you've got 13% less emissions, less pollution. As I always say, if you want to lose an election, upset the taxi drivers because they talk to a lot of people. It's something, I don't know how many millions of taxi fares a year in the country, I've forgotten now, but we're going to go up to 12.5 cents a litre tax on the clean fuel. Where's all this clean energy and environmental programs? You're taxing the very clean fuel that we have a big supply of in this country. It's not imported. The very own Australian fuel, you're taxing it to try and get your bottom line budget up to this budget surplus that is not negotiable. We will deliver. Oh, hang on, we'll go back on our word again. This is the point, Mr Acting Deputy President. So many Australian people do not trust this government. They do not trust this government to manage money, to spend it properly. I mean, you're spending $100 billion a year more in your annual budget than they did in the last year of the Howard government. $100 billion, just 5.5 years later. This is incredible. The government, the people do not trust you on carbon taxes, on promises, on caring for our people, our aged care facilities. It's amazing, the stimulus package, a federal responsibility aged care. They never got a red cent. And wherever you go around Australia, in the country towns, many of the country towns I visit, the aged care facilities are doing it so tough. But no, we went and put in all these school buildings into state schools, which is a state responsibility, pulling down perfectly good buildings and replacing them with a new building. We could go to Kingstown, where a little building about 10 metres long by 6 metres wide, $330,000. That'd build you a huge 4-bedroom brick home, but they get this little hut. Go out to Tottenham, literally in the centre of New South Wales, $600,000 for a tuck shop, and they couldn't fit the microwave in it. That's why people don't trust you to spend the money properly. You take the money off the taxpayers and off business, and you waste it like this. And these are the people I travel around to all the time in regional New South Wales, and have they got a set on this government? Even in the seat where I live in New England, many of them are being scathing on their local member, Mr Windsor, for giving us this government. Likewise in Lyne and Port Macquarie and those areas, for Mr Oakeshott for giving us government. Those traditionally Conservative seats, as seats for how they've been held for many, many years, show, and the Senate vote in those seats, but they'll get their day on September the 14th, those people in New England and Lyne, to have their say. As I often say, seats don't belong to politicians, they belong to the people. You betray your people, they'll let you know next election. All my life, Mr Acting Deputy President, whether it be state or federal Labor governments, they've sent us broke. Mortgaged up, filled up the bank card, filled up the MasterCard, mortgaged our children's futures away, and if they did some good about it, like built some decent infrastructure, well, you'd say, well, that's not a bad investment. But the amount of waste has been unbelievable. And hence, that is why I support this motion of Senator Fiefield's. The fiscal strategy of this government has been an absolute disgrace. $262 billion of debt. I don't know how we're going to pay it off. It'll just be hard work, and economic management will achieve that in time.